of Locked On Cardinals, Lucas Smith, who is a big Cardinals fan. Just go ahead and put a trigger warning on this. We are going to talk extensively about the 2011 World Series, what happened, why MLB absolutely cheated the Rangers out of winning a World Series, and what our teams have done since then. I do get a few good jabs of my own. I do deeply regret not making a Rams left St. Louis and are now in the Super Bowl joke. So this is insert whatever joke you want there. Lucas, if you're listening to this, I am not sorry, because I should have gotten more jabs than I did. But, it's fine. We're all fine, and things are going okay for the Rangers right now. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, baseball fans? Welcome to another special crossover edition of a couple of Locked On shows. I am Lucas Smith of Locked On Cardinals, joined today by Brice Paterik of Locked On Rangers. Brice, how are we doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. It's been 10 years since I'm not sure if I'm going to commit to, because on my show I normally have a bit of committing that I commit to pretty strongly that the Rangers actually won the 2011 World Series, but I feel like for this show actually talking about it is going to make it pretty hard to commit to that bit. But we're a decade past. I'm still not over it. I never will be. Give me 100 decades and I'll still never get over a lot of things from this World Series. But I'm happy I think it's the first crossover that we've ever done.
Yeah, I think it is, and it's going to be a great one because we're going to have positives for both teams in here. You mentioned the World Series, we'll talk about that, but you've got some jabs to get in on your own right as well, talking about trades a little bit later on, some former Cardinals lighting it up for the Rangers. But you know what you mentioned about it, let's go ahead and get right into it, and I'm just going to get this out of the way now. I have this on my desk with me. I just want you to see it. It's the World Series DVD, just so we have physical proof. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. Physical proof that the Cardinals did indeed win that World Series. But I guess we're going to start.
I also have my own proof, which is there we go over there. This is the 2010 pennant, not the 2011. I don't even want to remember that. The 2010 was great. That was like the honest to goodness start of my baseball fandom obsession, because I started watching every single game in 2010, and things went really well for the Rangers. Obviously, the World Series wasn't as bitterly lost. Like looking back, I'm like, that's a really random Giants team to lose to, but it was some even year BS, so I can wash my hands of it. But 2011 definitely brings up some strong memories. But that was one of the best World Series of all time, and it sucks so hard to be on the losing end of some of the greatest games of all time. I mean, I've done that. I was at I'm an Alabama fan, obviously, and I was at the Joe Burrow beating Alabama game. It was also an all-timer and not very fun, but I was also at the first Bama versus Georgia national championship, which was also an all-timer. So I know what it's like to be on the good end of an all-time series. But this is not the good end for the Rangers. No,
and it's bare minimum. It's one of the best Game 6s of all time. We'll get into Game 6 probably in a little while, but this Cardinal team is one that wasn't even supposed to be anywhere near the World Series, let alone the postseason. Everybody kind of knows the story of being 10.5 games back in first place on, I believe it was August 28th. Climbing the mountaintop in a month, beating the NL's best team that year, the Philadelphia Phillies, beating a division rival in the Brewers, and then going up against a Rangers team. They talk about it in the World Series DVD, and I don't know what you thought about it at the time, but these are two teams that really matched up pretty evenly. At the time, the Cardinals had a lineup that favored having a DH in the American League. We saw that with Alan Craig hitting a home run in Game 3. And it was just the definition of an even series throughout, and that's why it went 7 games.
Yeah, I just did a ranking of the top teams of all time and the top Rangers teams of all time, and I went back and I looked because there were some pretty good teams in 2016. That was a pretty solid team, but looking up and down this roster, this might have actually been the best. I think I ranked it as the best Rangers rotation, which is wild because the Rangers had a year where they had peak Cole Hamels. They also had peak Yu Darvish for about half the season. But this rotation, everybody in this rotation had an ERA plus of 100 or better. I mean, from C.J. Wilson, Colby Lewis, Derek Holland, Matt Harrison, Alexi Ogando, and the pen was aces too. I mean, there were a couple of 40-year-olds in there, and Darren Oliver at age 40, and Arthur Rhodes at age 41 didn't have as great a season, but that was just a really deep team. Obviously, they could have used a little bit deeper of a bullpen. Mark Lowe, every person named Lowe is dead to me, but that was, and the lineup depth was just incredible. I mean,
unbelievable.
I mean, Ian Kinsler was having a monster year. Adrian Beltre had Josh Hamilton, Nelson Cruz, Michael Young was bringing it that year, and you also had Mike Napoli, who was just absolutely crushing it. If not for that wretched Game 6, probably would have been the World Series MVP, because the guy had a monster season. I mean, an OPS over 1,000 while playing catcher / DH / whatever, and also a pretty solid David Murphy year. Like this team had the starting lineup, they had the defense, they had the pitching, the bullpen, the bench. It was just, this was one of the best teams. This is the best team in Rangers history.
And it just goes to show that in baseball specifically, it comes down to who's playing their best baseball at the best time. Again, the Rangers had some great games, and Ron Washington talks about it again in that World Series DVD, that he brings up a good point, especially in Game 6. That was, I think he had 3 or 4 errors in the first 5 innings. The Rangers were trying to put away a World Series championship. The Cardinals were trying to stay alive. But at the end of the day, we all know the heroics. We'll get into Game 6 in a little while. But I kind of want to go game by game a little bit here. And Game 1, we'll go groups of games, actually. We'll go Games 1 and 2. You had the Allen Craig and Alexi Ogando storyline of Craig having basically the same base hit in the same exact spot almost in the game, and in the situation, everything about it was just so bizarre. And Craig was somebody that had a nice couple of years after that season, but those 2 games really started his Cardinal legacy. And it was so bizarre to see Alexi Ogando kind of show his human side, because you mentioned he had a great regular season. He also had a fantastic American League Championship Series coming out of the bullpen. Obviously, the Rangers go ahead and win Game 2 based on some Elvis Andrus and Ian Kinsler speed on the base pass, but Allen Craig kind of stole the show in the first 2 games in St. Louis, and I think that was really, the first 2 games in and of itself were exciting, let alone the next 5.
Yeah, something that I just completely forgot. I was speaking of Arthur Rhodes. He pitched for both teams this year. I completely forgot about that, because I know he wasn't pitching for the Rangers, and I saw him in this World Series, and I'm like, oh, look, there he is on the Rangers. I'm like, wait a minute, he's on the Cardinals. I completely forgot about that.
Got it right.
Also, the extreme year of the loogie, he pitched in 19 games, only 8 2/3 innings during the regular season for the Cardinals.
Yeah.
Man,
lefty specialist.
Gosh. Those are the days.
That's just peak Tony La Russa right there. That's all that is.
It really is. But I think seeing the name Chris Carpenter sends me into a white hot rage, because of we'll get to the rain delay that wasn't a rain delay. It was stupid. That was the fix in from Major League Baseball. We'll get into that. But man, he was pitching out of his mind that whole series. I mean, you're without your ace. Your clear ace. You also, you had future Rangers ace Lance Lynn on the roster, but clearly things didn't go as well with him in St. Louis as they did in Texas. Yeah,
Lynn is one of those guys that, kind of similar to Craig, got his start there in 2011. He gave up, I think, back-to-back home runs in Game 6 to Beltre and Nelson Cruz, I want to say. But, going back to the point you talked about, Arthur Rhodes pitching for both teams and the bullpen, and both these bullpens, both of them blew up a little bit in Game 3, in addition to Matt Harrison and Fernando Salas, who started those 2 games. But both these bullpens were really locked down. And I think that this is a great example. A reason that it was such an all-time series was that you had 2 bullpens performing at their best. And like you mentioned, they weren't on the young side either. You had a couple 40-year-olds for the Rangers. You had Arthur Rhodes for the Cardinals. Octavio Dotel was a huge member of that Cardinal bullpen that really, especially in the National League Championship Series, really shut down the bat of Ryan Braun of the Milwaukee Brewers. But once you got to Texas, you saw the pitching duel kind of go out of the window unless your name was Derek Holland. Because Chris Carpenter, Colby Lewis, Jaime Garcia, and C.J. Wilson all pitched phenomenally in St. Louis in Games 1 and 2. In Games 3, 4, and 5, obviously the game moves to Texas. You see the offense bust out. You see the heroic performance of Albert Pujols in Game 3. But I want to hear your thoughts and what your memories are of Game 4 and Derek Holland really shutting down the Cardinal offense that game.
Oh my God, I remember Game 4 because before Derek Holland turned into what he is now, which is kind of, well, he's always a goofball. He's a little more, slightly more problematic goofball that I don't love as much as I did. But like, I really love Derek Holland. Like, that was my guy, and I remember very vividly. This was my senior year in high school when I was watching this, and I went to this. I was already like a rabid fan, and this girl that I liked invited me to her church. They were having a watching party there, and so I watched this game with my crutch at her church, and Derek Holland did that, and I was like, "This is the greatest day of my entire life. Nothing can go wrong. The Rangers are going to win the World Series. The Mavs have already won the NBA championship this year. Like, the Cowboys are going to get their crap together, and everything is going to be amazing in DFW sports." Well, it didn't quite work out that way, and one of the many things I love Ron Washington. I still do. But there are a couple of unforgivable things, and one of the unforgivable things is after Derek Holland goes out and pitches this, not starting him in Game 7 will always make me lose my mind. Now, Derek Holland is the most Jekyll and Hyde pitcher. Like, what I think of as a number 4, he is like the best version of a number 4 starter. That some games, they'll go out and they'll do this. Like, they'll go 8 1/3 innings, allow 2 hits, 2 walks, no runs, strike out 7, the biggest stage, look absolutely nasty, and then the next day they could go and crap the bed and not make it out of the 3rd inning. But, like, I don't know, just riding that high, I felt like you gotta ride the hot hand. You just gotta ride the hot hand, and clearly they didn't, and clearly it didn't go well. But that game is like one of my favorite baseball games of all time, which I never think about because of all the things that happened afterwards, obviously.
Well, we've got a little bit of time left to talk about those things. We've got a couple of historical performances I want to get to. I'll talk about Albert a little bit more, and then we can't end this discussion fully until we talk about Game 6. But before we get to any of that, Brice, I want to make you happy a little bit. I want to give you some good news, okay? Because if you're like me and you're a sweet tooth, but you still want to stay healthy, there's this item called the Built Bar. It's the time of year where we're starting to give up our resolutions, but you can still stay healthy with that delicious treat, because a Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. All Built Bars are covered 100% in chocolate, and including their item called the Puffs, which is a protein-infused marshmallow. That sounds delicious.
I mean, how do they do it? That's just like Built Bar magic, like a protein-infused marshmallowy bar that's covered in 100% chocolate. Like, there's some science or magic there at work. Maybe it's a little bit of both.
It's a Built Bar magic similar to the Cardinal magic that was used in 2011. But you can go to Built.com right now and scroll through the incredible flavors, as well as check out how most Built Bars contain just 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, dozens of net carbs, and no protein. So Built Bar is the way to go. So go to Built.com right now and use the promo code LOCKED15, that is LOCKED15, and get 15% off your order. Use that promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. So we talked a little bit about the Derek Holland performance. I'll save you just for a few moments to start preparing yourself for Game 6. But I'm
already ready.
I'll talk about Game 3 first, because Game 3, I think, as historic as it was from an Albert Pujols standpoint, gets forgotten because of what David Freese did just a couple of games later. But Albert Pujols was hitless in every single at-bat in Games 1 and 2. He had a pretty solid NLCS, so you're wondering where his bat was. And he comes out there and hits 3 home runs, the first player that had done that since Reggie Jackson of the New York Yankees. At the time, one of 3 players to have that feat. And he hit some bombs, one of them off of Alexio Gondo that hit probably the 8th or 9th deck in Arlington or something crazy. And then obviously the home runs off of Darren Oliver and Marco Gonzalez, I want to say was that left-handed reliever's name. But just a historic performance from Albert Pujols that, like I said, gets forgotten because the final score was something like 16-8. But
Mike Gonzalez.
Thank you very much.
Mike Gonzalez, Darren Oliver, and was the lefty, and Alexio Gondo.
Yeah.
Which, like, this one didn't hurt as badly because, like, I mean, like you said, Albert Pujols was, like, eerily quiet, because at this time Albert Pujols is the monster, the hitting machine of the generation, like the one of the most dangerous offensive players of all time in his prime, and the Rangers kind of shut him down for the first couple games, and I'm like, something's gonna happen. Something bad is gonna happen, and Albert Pujols is going to do it to us. It doesn't matter if nobody else. Like, there's gonna be one game where Albert Pujols goes off, and if you can survive that, then like good Lord, you're definitely winning it. But like Adrian Beltre also had a really good game this game. He had a 4-hit game, had a double off of Lance Lynn. I mean, Michael Young and Nelson Cruz, they did their best to try and, keep it close. Michael Young had a couple of extra base hits, a home run, and a double as well. Nelson Cruz also hit his 7th home run of the postseason, which that guy who gets too much crap. While we're on the subject of 2011, I got to briefly bring up the fact that, I mean, obviously, like Nelson Cruz, we'll get to Game 6 in just a second, but he gets the crap for missing that play and not playing no doubles defense, and Rangers fans are like, oh, I'll never forgive him for that. Well, the Rangers aren't in the World Series if Nelson Cruz isn't on this team. What he did to that historic Detroit Tigers pitching staff, multiple like Hall of Famers on that staff, and he made them look childish and hit the greatest and onlyest walk-off grand slam in MLB postseason history with the lamest call from Joe Buck I've ever heard in my life. I sometimes I think, maybe I'm being too hard on him. Then I'll go back and listen. He's like, and it's a walk-off grand slam. And I'm like, dude, this is never something that has never happened in Major League Baseball. Anytime that happens, that's a miracle because there's been so many freaking baseball games of all time. Like anything that's like new and never happened before, like that deserves like I'm crapping my pants kind of a call. And Joe Buck is just like, I weakly tinkled down my leg kind of a call.
Well, I think everybody from every fan base somehow has a reason to hate on Joe Buck, and maybe it's because he started out as a Cardinal broadcaster, but I have no problem with Joe Buck. He's gotten better as the years have gone on.
I actually don't have a problem with him. That's like my only thing. I'm like, I'm gonna give you some for that, and for some obvious. Like, I can't blame him for being a little bit like, partial. It felt as a Rangers fan that he was a little bit partial to the Cardinals, which like how can you not be when your dad's like you were raised Cardinals? Like that takes some real getting to like to be neutral, and he probably did do a pretty good job from the neutral's perspective. But that one call will always bother me, and he can never go fix it. But he has been better since then. Anyway, let's get into the worst baseball game of all time, Game 6 in 2011.
Yeah, I'll let you have the floor first. I talked about Albert, so I'll let you give your experience for Game 6 first. You go ahead.
I'll start with this. I did not enjoy it. I did not like it. It was the most nervous I've ever been at a sporting game or ever will be. Mm-hmm. It about killed me, and every time I see any clip from it, even the good clips, like it still gives me PTSD, and it always will. And that's kind of the nice thing, the fun thing about sports. They're like, wow, I care so much about this. But like even looking back, because it's been so painful to even look back at all. It's just like, oh wait, I kind of forgot that Colby Lewis started this game, and that Derek Holland pitched a little bit in this as well. It's just like there's all these little things that I've tried to suppress, and like the like offensive barrage from Beltre and Cruz with those back-to-back home runs off of Lance Lynn and Josh Hamilton's home run in the 10th inning when I still had hope for humanity, and I thought, that's it, this is it, he did it, Josh Hamilton, God bless him, and all the things that have happened since have not been quite as good. But it's just, I don't even know what to say about this game. It sucked. Right. Also, Mitch Moreland was terrible all series, which hurt my heart because Mitch always has a special place in my heart. Offensive threat Mitch Moreland, as we referred to him as now. But gosh, I think this is rough.
And it would have been, like, especially you mentioned the Josh Hamilton moment. That is, like, typical Ranger, right? Like he was the guy at that point. Like he would, like, if anybody was going to save their season and win the World Series, it's going to be Josh Hamilton. You know, at least from an outsider's perspective, and especially that he hadn't hit a home run that entire postseason series and all these different things. But it ended up just being, not in the cards. Pun intended.
He had a 3-hit game, 3 RBIs, a pair of runs. Like he did everything he could in that game. But he at that point only had a 700 OPS, which for Josh Hamilton is pretty low, especially since the season before he hit 359, which is just wild. He never came anything close to that afterwards, but just all these details are escaping me because I have tried so hard to purge them from my memory, but just the back and forth every single inning, like every inning there was something. Like every inning you were on the edge of your seat. Like this really is one of the all-time great baseball games, and it really sucks so hard that it didn't go the Rangers' way.
The only thing that would have made it more historic would have been if it was a Game 7. That's it, right? Because it was Game 6. One person was going to win, one person was gonna lose their season. And obviously all those little details don't get remembered because it gets remembered as the David Freese game. I mean, talk about a storyline as well. You have David Freese, who almost quit baseball, or who did quit baseball at the time, hometown kid, grew up a Cardinal fan. He ties it in the 9th, and then you have Lance Berkman tie it in the 10th, who is, again,
stupid Lance Berkman,
a longtime Cardinal killer with the Houston Astros, Big Puma, just doing his thing. And then the very next inning, you have David Freese, hometown kid, winning it again. It was just one of those things. I remember when Hamilton hit his home run, I was 11 years old at the time. And I just remember burying my head on the couch and just absolutely sobbing and crying. Because that, contrary to you, I had lost all hope in humanity as an 11-year-old watching this game. And then just
hadn't your team already won a World Series during your lifetime?
When I was 6, so I have no memory of that team, of actually watching this team. But still, and then, a couple innings later, you have the jubilation. And then Game 7, Rangers come out there right on top of their game and getting a run, if not 2, in the first inning off of Carpenter. Freese, who else, ties it in the bottom of the first inning with a double to left center off of Matt Harrison. It was just a series, like you said, that went back and forth. It was a heavyweight fight, and you mentioned Joe Buck earlier.
I honestly forgot the Game 7 the Rangers took the lead because I just remember it being hopeless. Because after that, I mean, how can you have hope for anything after that game? It's like, yeah, no, that's it. I mean, like, there's still a Game 7, but no, that's it. It's in St. Louis, and then especially once the stupid rain delay that wasn't even raining. It wasn't even raining. They called it preemptively, and then it didn't end up raining, so they could get Chris Carpenter on the mound for a Game 7. And it was like, I still feel that was like the wrong move. Obviously, there's no grand conspiracy. Maybe there is. I don't know. I'm not inside baseball's front office to know that, but it felt so personally wrong. I felt so personally wronged, and I still do to this day, and I'm sure many other Rangers fans do. And I'm sure anybody a part of that team feels especially like personally wronged by that decision. It's like, they just that you see what just happened to the Rangers. Like, at least let them get their one advantage of not letting Chris Carpenter go on like moderately short rest as opposed to like mostly short rest. Like,
well, you forget earlier in that postseason season, Chris Carpenter went on short rest in Game 2 against the Philadelphia Phillies in the Division Series and just got absolutely just got beat. I think he gave up 4 or 5 runs in that start. So it was one of those things that, when the Cardinals made that decision, a lot of, looking back on it, a lot of people were saying, why would you start him on short days rest, 2 weeks after he did not perform on short days rest or 3 days rest, whatever it was. But obviously we know Carpenter gives up 2 runs and then doesn't give up anything else. 6 innings after that. If it wouldn't have been for a hanging curveball that David Murphy hit for a double, he probably would have gone 7, if not 8 innings. But it was, it was a typical Chris Carpenter type start, just mowing down hitters, and he was just on it. And Chris Carpenter, one of my favorite all-time Cardinal pitchers, maybe not one of the best all-time from a Cardinals perspective, but one of my favorite. And I'll finish up the World Series talking about Jack Buck. You mentioned that his father was a longtime Cardinal announcer, Jack Buck, and he had one of the greatest, he had an homage to his father in Game 6 of the We Will See You Tomorrow Night. Jack Buck did that in 1991 when Kirby Puckett hit the home run. And this might be bias, but of all the World Series that Joe Buck has done, his call for the 2011 World Series championship is one of my favorite. What a team, what a ride. The Cardinals are World Series champs in 2011. And for me, it was one of the most enthusiastic calls, one of the great calls, and a great call, and an all-time call for me for an ending of an all-time great team and an all-time great World Series. So that's we're done. We don't want to support you anymore about talking about the World Series. That's the last thing I'll say. I love Joe Buck's call in Game 6 and in Game 7. That's the only last thing I'll say about the World Series.
Oh yeah, that was an all-time series, and definitely a lot of things happened after that makes the moment hurt worse. But you can bet the Rangers will be back in a World Series, and if you want to bet on something big, on something, well, I guess Joe Buck's not calling it. Dang it, that would have been a really nice transition if Joe Buck was calling this a bet on a big event that Joe Buck is not calling, a different sport. You can go to Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered this season with more odds, props, and lines than ever before as football continues its march to the big game this weekend. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. If you were a betting man, Lucas, who would you be betting on in this Super Bowl? I know I'm going with the Texas hometown kid. Did you know that this Texas hometown kid is friends and grew up with Clayton Kershaw? That's right, it's Matthew Stafford.
You know what? I think this is going to be a great game. I just really like the momentum that Joey Burrow and the Bengals are on right now. So if I were a betting man, I would place bets on the Bengals.
Yeah, either way, this is going to be a solid game. And, it's not just football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of current games. So don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, these two teams headed, well, I guess they were both pretty competitive for quite a while after this. This was right in the middle of their run. This is kind of still the beginning of the Rangers' run. They had only just made the playoffs for the first time since the turn of the century the year before, and they made it to the World Series. Their first two playoff runs in the new, I guess, old now era, they made the World Series, and they never won another playoff series since then, which makes life that much harder. I was about to say they haven't won a single playoff game since then, but that's not true. They did win a couple, I think in 2015 against the Blue Jays, but then lost in that stupid, tragic, upsetting Game 5 in 2015.
That was a bad way to lose.
Yeah, but the thing that makes it hurt worse is that Adrian Beltre. This is the chance for Adrian Beltre to get his ring. He is an all-timer. He is beloved. He still wasn't a Rangers fan favorite. In case you didn't know, there's some history about the Rangers in 2011. Beltre wasn't their first choice going in after the 2010 season. He wasn't their first choice in free agency for a big fish to hook. They wanted to bring Cliff Lee back because they loved Cliff Lee. He helped lead them to their first ever World Series. They sorely needed some pitching help, and they whiffed out on Cliff Lee. He kind of strung them along a little bit and then decided, he wanted to be close to home for his family, and, I respect that decision. And really glad the Rangers didn't end up signing him because, I guess we'll settle for Adrian Beltre, who becomes the most beloved and one of the best players in franchise history.
Right.
And the Rangers clearly had a pretty big window after that, but the last couple of years have been really rough for the Rangers. They have absolutely bottomed out, and obviously they had a phenomenal offseason. Looked like they're in a really great place coming up. But, what happened with the Cardinals has happened with the Cardinals in the decade since then. Obviously, you won, I think, one more World Series, so just totally spoiled rotten. But what all has been going on in the last, I guess, decade? Wow. Since that World Series happened.
Loaded question. The Cardinals went to the World Series in 2013, but did not win. That was Boston's strong year with David Ortiz winning the MVP, new Hall of Famer David Ortiz. So they lost that World Series in 6 games. But yeah, that was
I do remember enjoying that World Series.
now you remember why you enjoyed that World Series. No, the Cardinals had a tremendous amount of success. They made the National League Championship Series in 13 and 14, 3 straight championship series. Made a playoff run in 2015 before being dismantled by the Cubs. But that 2015 team arguably was the best one of the 3 that did not go to the World Series. We had won 100-something, or 100. I think they won exactly 100 games, and it was just, the start of the Cubs dynasty there. But then the Cardinals went on a 3-year playoff drought in 16, 17, 18, while the Cubs and Brewers kind of battled at the top. And then
3 whole years. Oh,
I know. I don't know what I was doing with myself. I was mind-boggling. But then in the last couple of years, you had Mike Schill take over, and he had a large amount of success, making the postseason in 2019, winning the division, making it all the way to the National League Championship Series, losing to the eventual World Series champion Washington Nationals, and then in 2020 with the COVID year and everything, they found another way to make it to the postseason and lose to the Padres. Just talked to Javier Reyes on my show on Wednesday, and then last year making it to the postseason and losing to the Dodgers. So it's still been a large amount of success from the St. Louis Cardinals standpoint. They've been able to get the big names. They got Marcell Ozuna a couple years ago. Obviously, that didn't work out long term. Then they were able to get Paul Goldschmidt, which has worked out long term, and then get Nolan Arenado on a trade on an absolute fleece. As well
wasn't the Goldschmidt trade of absolute fleece too? I remember it being
that one's
really
borderline.
Confused.
That might take a little while to pan out because Luke Weaver and Carson Kelly were the 2 pieces sent over, or the 2 main pieces, sent over to Arizona, and Carson Kelly did have a 19 to 20 home run season right thereafter. And
still, Paul Goldschmidt is the best first baseman in like that nobody really thinks about or talks about, but like he's just like Mr. Guy. That is like he is one of my all-time favorites because he is a Tex. I can't remember exactly where in Texas he's from, but I know he went to Texas State and was a guy who like. I mean, everyone has like the like nobody bet on me, nobody thought I could do anything, but like this guy went to Texas State, like the 7th or 8th biggest school in Texas, not really thought of as he's from the Woodlands, which is just outside of it's like the fancy part of Houston, which made me regret immediately saying that I liked him. But he was an 8th round pick of the Diamondbacks, and the guy was like, all right, I don't know, this guy is like fine, he's not really that good at anything, but just became great at everything, and in all time like just proving everybody wrong kind of guy, and like is just one of the most well-rounded first basemen that I think I've seen in this generation, and love his success story. Hate that it's with the Cardinals now, but
he's one of those guys. I think he and Nolan Arenado do fit, and Jeff Carr, as I mentioned a lot on the show, will hate me for saying this. They do fit the Cardinal way. Jeff Carr, Locked on Reds, hates that. Although shout out to Jeff Carr. They fit the Cardinal way. They go out, they do their business. I don't think either one of them.
Hold on. How is he not an All-Star this year? He finished 6th at MVP voting. Like had a 30 home run season.
Paul Goldschmidt never has a good first half ever. Very rarely, I should say.
It's still insane. Like I always love looking. He hasn't been an All-Star since coming to St. Louis, so maybe that's the Cardinal way. Ooh.
Yeah, I think the Cardinal way is winning divisions. I don't know what the Ranger way is.
The Ranger way is sucking really bad right now, and then spending a whole bunch of money, and then causing a lockout. That's the Ranger way. But there is something. I mean, this current Ranger team, well, I guess the last year's Ranger team is really painful to talk about. There is one thing that I got to thank you for that would have made me, like, this season made me very depressed. Like, it's one of the most depressing seasons that I've experienced in baseball, even more so than in 2020 when there was, like, a COVID shortened season and the Rangers decided to be trash, which, again, if your team ever does go into the full rebuild thing, I don't know, I guess you've got such a competent front office and, good ownership that is willing to spend and go do things that you haven't had to go do that full teardown. But I would encourage you, if you do decide to start the full teardown, starting it in a 60-game season is very helpful to kind of ease you into the pain. I mean, the full 162 of being absolute trash is definitely not advisable, but the 60-game skid, like slow drop off into madness and sadness, where you can see it coming, like it did help a little bit. But the one at the end of the season, he wasn't really that great at the end of the season, but one of the only bright spots for the Rangers this season was Adolis Garcia, a guy who both the Rangers and the Cardinals had kind of given up on, but the Rangers acquired him before the 2020 season, played in 3 whole games, 7 plate appearances in 2020. I honestly don't remember a second of him playing in 2020. And the Rangers wanted to put him on their roster before the season, but non-tendered him, and he passed around through waivers, and nobody claimed him. For the start of the season, he didn't make it opening day, waited a couple weeks. Leody Taveras was absolutely terrible, and then the Rangers bring him up, and he is an absolute firecracker for 2 months, one of the best players in baseball for a 2-month stretch, and becomes an All-Star. Now, what is his future? I don't know. I don't think he might not be an All-Star ever again, but he's at least a solid player and a real fun player. Do you remember many of his moments? Because he only had 17 plate appearances in 21 games with the Cardinals in 2018. Do you remember anything about his time there?
I really don't. It was one of those thought processes the Cardinals had at that time, a loaded outfield prospect pool. You had Dylan Carlson, Adolis Garcia, Harrison Bader, Randy Arozarena, another outfielder that the Cardinals gave up on that is shown to be, at least in 2 seasons, shown to be a mistake. But I really don't remember much of Adolis Garcia. I remember him lighting it up and thinking, oh man, here's another outfielder the Cardinals messed up on. But I do think that the Cardinals outfield talent right now of Tyler O'Neill, Harrison Bader, and Dylan Carlson more than makes up for that. But it was nice to see Adolis Garcia find success in Texas, just like Lance Lynn did a couple years ago as well. So the Cardinals, trying to repay the debt that they owe the Rangers, I suppose, for ripping the hearts out of so many Texas Rangers fans, I suppose.
There's going to need to be like 3 MVP level players like that are sent over. I mean, like you send me like a new Albert Pujols from age 20, then I might start forgiving. I mean, I love the Lance Lynn, and there was a thought that after his current contract with the White Sox was up, that he might come back to Texas because he loved his time in Texas and they treated him really well. And they decided not to trade him at the deadline in 2020 because his wife, I believe, was pregnant and he wanted to, keep his family in one place during that. So they respected that and waited till the offseason to trade him. But again, much thanks for those guys. I mean, Adolis, real great breakout season, absolutely fell off a cliff the last couple of months of the season, which I don't blame him. I got to admit, my podcast quality and my level of happiness during the shows also fell off a tank once Joey Gallo left, and I will never, ever be the same until, God willing, he decides to come back out of a personal favor to me because we are such close, great friends.
Well, I think, the Rangers spent a ton of money in this offseason before the lockout happened, and we'll see if that provides any success moving forward in 2022. If we even see a full season in 2022 remains to be seen.
We'd freaking better. Whether the Rangers are going to be good or not, I don't know. They're not going to be unwatchable, and that is the one thing that I'm most thankful for, the one thing I wanted most this offseason. Get me one person, all I wanted, and I got more, but give me one person who makes me watch every game and gives me a reason to be excited about watching Texas Rangers baseball, because when you don't have that, oh boy, it gets depressing real fast.
Yeah, well, Green Rangers definitely have that, especially up the middle on the middle infield. So it should be hopefully a fun season for Texas Rangers fans. I know that Cardinal fans are excited for their season as well. But Brice, regardless, I hope it wasn't too painful for you to start, but I appreciate the time, and I'm glad we were able to get this crossover set up. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's almost more painful to talk about a 2011 World Series than it is a 2021 team that was absolutely doggy doo-doo. But, remembering the Rangers were good at one point helps me believe that at one point they will be again. So great talking with you. Where can the folks listening to Locked On Rangers find you and your work, Lucas?
You can find me on Twitter at LJFastball. If you're watching on YouTube, it's right down there. And you can also find the Locked On Cardinals podcast anywhere you find your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And you can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at LO_Cardinals. Brice, why don't you do the same for Locked On Cardinals listeners?
You can find me on Twitter at Brice Paterik. As you're watching on YouTube, you can see it there. And on Twitter, you can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Thankfully, we got the Rangers account with no underscore. You feel my pain for having another show with your exact same name. Yes, we're the baseball Rangers and not the New York Hockey Rangers. But thanks again for taking the time to talk with me. And I'm glad that somebody enjoyed that 2011 World Series, even if it wasn't me.
Well, I definitely did enjoy it, and I will. I'm not going to talk about it anymore, but I am just going to show this one more time. Keep watching on YouTube. But thanks for listening, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Rangers. Thank you so much to Lucas Smith for being so generous with your time and talking about what is one of the best World Series in recent memory, but also one of the worst, in my own personal opinion. I'll be back on Monday with the final edition of my top 30 Rangers prospects. I'm going to unleash my top 5 and then take a look at the whole shebang. Lots of good prospects on there for Monday and a Super Bowl this weekend to enjoy. But until then, don't forget to enjoy baseball.